So what I'm going to aim to do is just give you a perspective on what we're seeing at Twitter, the way that consumption of all digital content is changing, and then specifically to look at digital out of home. So I hope it won't be too indulgent. I'll start. I saw this tweet recently. I'll sort of read this for you. So anyone who's not familiar with Youth Argo, well, WTF stands for what the fuck, and it says, what the fuck is wrong with this dude? What's he looking at? The world. Let's have a look at him. Let's go in and have a look at this chap here. There you go. So here it is. There's a train platform here, and there's some sort of misty-eyed chap just sort of gazing with a sense of dislocated loss, wondering what on earth's happening in the world around him. Just a fascinating insight into the way that we're consuming media and the way that things are going on. Just an interesting perspective. I guess, you know, one of the things, I was really familiar with this. I was on a train recently, I was on a tube, and I noticed that if you counted everyone with earphones in and looking at a screen, it pretty much included everyone on the platform, on the train. And this illustrates here that this isn't a completely unique thing. Someone replied to that original tweet saying this woman was the 1946 equivalent. So everyone had immersed in newspapers. And I think probably what it illustrates is that we can be obsessed with the idea that people are distracted and they're doing different things. In fact, it's just an illustration that there's always a dominant media. I don't think that this is a bad thing for digital out of home, that people are looking at other things. More, it's an illustration that we behave in certain ways and the medium's changed. So I mentioned at the outset, the thing I'm going to do now is just talk through the way that Twitter's evolving, the way that digital consumption's evolving, and then specifically give reference for digital out of home. So look, here's one of the things that characterises the way that digital media is being consumed. And specifically, if I go to the next one, while we've got 15 million users, the thing that specifically marks out the users of Twitter is the fact that 80% of those people consume it on their mobile phones. So it's principally, if you see the growth of digital consumption of social media right now, it very strongly links to the way that we're using smartphones. As smartphones grow, we're using more social media. Specifically, a couple of use cases for you. So half of all people are using social media like Twitter during a commute. 60% of people are using it alongside TV. And it's sort of an illustration of the way our attention is being distracted. So a couple of examples from the last week, if I go to the next slide. So this is, I don't know if anyone watched this. This is Eurovision on Saturday night. Eurovision, there were about 5 million tweets. So anyone who watched Eurovision on Saturday would recognise this. So I mentioned that 60% of Twitter's audience tend to consume Twitter while they're watching TV. You can see the peak here is when Austria performed, and then at the very end there is when Austria won the overall competition. So big peaks, really sort of reflecting the pulse of how something plays out like that. This is the winner, Conchita there, that's the Austrian entry. There was a nice tweet from the BBC. You can see Russell Brand tweeted, I'm knackered, but what a great night. So just an illustration of how these things play out. And what we're tending to see is that because of the way that our screens accompany everything they do, they're becoming the sort of personal element of what we're doing. Here's a news story that came out yesterday. So when Ashley Cole was told that he wasn't in the main squad of 23 for the World Cup, he announced his retirement via a tweet. So the news takes hold from there and spreads from there. So just that became news story that was everywhere yesterday. Here's another example of that. Before Roy Hodgson announced his England squad line by line, when he handed the press release to journalists yesterday, they also tweeted out what the squad was going to be. So these things take hold and they're big news stories from them. The fun thing I'll show you is just how this is starting to play a part in digital diplomacy, an interesting exchange of messages between people. So probably one of the things that we hear from people who don't use Twitter is they say, I don't want to read what people had for breakfast. And in fact, probably it's worth saying that people tend not to tweet what they're doing right now, but more tweet what they're finding interesting right now. This is a tweet from the US Embassy, the UK Embassy in Russia. It happened a couple of months ago. This was just at the outset of the Crimea situation. Russian armed forces installed pro-Russian puppet administration and railroaded through referendum. So quite muscular language for an embassy. The Russian embassy replied, people of Crimea will think otherwise, dear colleagues. Well, will of people comes first, does it not? So sort of exchanges, diplomatic exchanges live in public. And that definitely played a part when it came to our own Prime Minister. If we go to the next slide. David Cameron, when he participated in the discussion about Crimea, he posted a rather earnest-looking photograph of him phoning Barack Obama. And that really sort of, that provoked an international response. So mobilizing forces from around the world. This is the American comedian Rob Delaney. Also, next up we had the Patrick Stewart joining the call. And then finally the comedian Michael Moreno, emulating the one foot in the grave clip that we saw earlier. So an illustration really, I guess the point of all of that is that it's an illustration of how little ideas can be exchanged, and when we're constantly refreshing that stream, these are the things that will fill people's updates. So you might not be familiar with this guy. This is a chap called Evan Spiegel, and he's the guy who owns Snapchat, so you can see part of Snapchat's logo there. He did an incredible speech in January this year, just really talking about the way that the internet's evolved. And the one thing he talked about, he talked specifically about we're all constantly learning what the internet stands for and what the internet's about. But when those things change and when those sands are shifting under our feet all the time, sometimes we forget to reappraise them. So he specifically was asked why Snapchat had no profile pages, why he didn't have a profile page on something like Snapchat. And his point was that a profile page was specifically relevant when you weren't online all the time. So when you made occasional excursions into the world of being online, it was quite important to post up, this is who I am, this is who I account for, to some extent like the equivalent of an answer phone in old technology, accounting for your identity on the web. And he said, but principally there's been a change. That notion of the separation between an online state and an offline state has really disappeared. Effectively, by having phones in people's pockets now, we're online all the time. And the way that that's affecting the consumption of digital technology is quite marked. So specifically, we're seeing a phenomenon that's becoming like a stream of content. And that's not only influencing mobile apps, that also influences news sites. So this is my current obsession, which is the Oscar Pistorius case. But if you can have a look at the way that something like The Telegraph's reporting this is a live story. So it isn't just being updated 2 or 3 times a day. It's a live story. It's updating every 90 seconds. And the story is effectively playing out. It's a stream of content rather than a single thing. Or another one, if I take a look here at the Guardian website, so on the day I captured this, look at the number of instances of the word live. So you've got live, latest, live, live, live. Effectively, all of the content that we're seeing now is really emphasizing the fact it's no longer static. And I think specifically digital out of home can really benefit from this. The notion that we're always looking for something, even if it's small, effectively, it's the way that rolling news has influenced everything we do. Even the smallest revelation can add to the stream of what's happening. So specifically now, if I look at websites, you see the phenomenon of an updating stream is becoming the default way that we navigate websites. Things like Instagram, Vine there, that's BuzzFeed, that's just an incredible site, and really just trying to give new stuff all the time. When I look at Twitter, the way that influences what we've done on Twitter is effectively there's a constant stream all the time. What we've added to the stream more recently is we've added images there and we've added the ability to take actions. So those are the big trends that are happening. Effectively, mobile phones are becoming a default media device. And secondly, the way that we're consuming content, there's the obsession with the new. There's an obsession with what's happening right now. So now to go on and take a look at digital out of home. And what we're seeing, I think Coca-Cola really mentioned, Chris from Coca-Cola really mentioned the power of this, is effectively the notion of a big idea that can exist on a screen is strongly enhanced by thousands of little tiny connections to some of the people who participate in it. And I think what digital technology, especially digital technology on people's phones, has allowed that to be very simple, allowed that simple exchange, that moment of magic for the consumer to happen almost seamlessly, in the effect that it doesn't damage the overall message for everyone else, but it allows a very strong amplification of it. So one illustration, I think Coca-Cola's examples were as good as any, but you'll see something similar in this BT campaign. So this is something where BT took their asset, which is the BT Tower, and they created a campaign which was tweets on the tower. So you can see how the campaign worked. They tweeted out, in the run-up to Christmas, they were spending a week allowing messages to appear on the BT Tower. And very similar to what we saw from Chris, you can see here that every time that something was tweeted, they would, in fact, while that was on there momentarily, they would turn that into an asset that then would be sent on to the person concerned. So immediately, we saw there was reach of hundreds of thousands of people from these tweets, retweets as well from celebrities. I saw one from Cameron Diaz, she retweeted, a massive extended reach from that. So effectively turning the digital screen and the fact that we're fascinated with what's happening right now, the new, turning that into an asset. Another example here is, this is a campaign for links or Axe in the US. I've abbreviated the ad here, but effectively it takes a TV ad, then it uses that as a stimulus to try and get people to respond, and then takes those responses and turns them into an asset for digital out of home. So let's show you the ad.
Michael.
Make love, not war. With new Axe Peace.
So I've shortened the ad slightly there, but the overall gist is Vladimir Putin needs a can of Axe. The notion that somehow supermarket deodorant can prevent world conflict, he sort of runs through that. And the way that they extended the campaign then is they then encourage people to use that hashtag and to start sending tweets. And very similar, very much paying homage to the Coca-Cola notion, is they took the equivalent, so this was the US campaigns, they took Times Square, and they said, tweet us your images of you kissing for peace, and we'll post it in Times Square. So it became part of effectively linking the different elements. Here's one of the winning campaigns, and effectively each one of these will show on the screen for a very short period of time. They're creating packaging up a digital asset that is passed around and extended to people. The benefit of it clearly is that not only does this have a singular impact on the individuals involved, but quite often these things are picked up and have a very strong PR element to them. So this got quite a lot of press coverage and was picked up really as just a way to extend what had been the TV campaign that was running in the Super Bowl, one of the top rated ads in the Super Bowl. Another one I'll show you here, more examples of just really how people respond. What we find is an extraordinary thing that anytime people are touched specifically by a brand, so anytime a brand contacts an individual, we see that on social media, and I think it's probably true on Facebook as well, the impact of that extends far beyond what you might anticipate. We find that when someone receives a tweet from a brand, they feel an incredible connection to the discussion that's taking place. So something like this, using a digital out-of-home asset in that way, can be incredibly potent. I'll go on and show you another example here. So this is, again, very similar. It's trying to interweave the currency and the pace of social media updating and using it as an asset for a digital campaign. So this is a campaign that's been running for quite a while now for Pepsi Max for Live for Now, hashtag Live for Now. And what they effectively do, if I go on to the next slide, they try and turn all of their digital screens into firstly, a stimulus, so they encourage people to send them a Vine. So a Vine is a 6-second video, and they say, so send us your Vine, so effectively encouraging process of digital creation, send us your Vine, and we'll put it on the screen. So it's a two-way creative loop, but effectively turning those things into assets. The thing that really has been clear to me throughout, and just a reminder of how these things have evolved, everyone has mentioned the notion of trying to bring the live element of screens, and I think the BBC chap mentioned it as well. The live element is really critical. What we find throughout, every time that we create a campaign, quite often the things that connect aren't necessarily the biggest gag or the most beautifully rendered creativity, but timeliness is a really critical element. There's a guy we work with who does a lot of work promoting how to tweet effectively, a guy called David Schneider, who's a comedian. And he mentions the impact of timeliness. He says that quite often you can tweet the same thing out an hour before everyone else has seen the news story. But you tweet it out when everyone's seen the story, and the effect can be exponential. And I think that's the benefit of digital out of home. Sometimes the concept that you present doesn't have to be genius. It can just be incredibly amplified by timeliness. And so that's the benefit that digital out of home connects. That effectively social media, that notion of a stream is being played out on big scale. So I started off with this chap here. This chap sort of, I presume he's actually looking for a plug socket to plug his phone charger in. But just an illustration, really, of how screens are consuming our lives. And I think the potency of connecting that real-time moment is probably the big opportunity for all of us. Thank you very much.